Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Noizze Podcast as part of the Noizze Podcast Network and sponsored by Stereo Brain Records. This is a two-part episode. The first portion, me and Jack discuss the new Amon Amarth album, The Great Heathen Army. And then after that, in the second portion, I speak to Sam from Ithaca and we discuss the new album, the writing process, what they hope to achieve, how they wrote the album, all this good stuff and what they're doing moving forward and all that type of thing. Thank you so much and enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Noizze Podcast, sponsored by Stereo Brain Records and part of the Noizze Podcast Network. I'm once again joined by my very good friend, Jack Holloway, with an introduction that I'm sure he could accept as usual. Jack, how are you on this fine day?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, mate. It's good to be here. I've flown in. I was in a polo shirt about 10 minutes ago, by the way.
Wow.
It's the smoothest transition from work Jack to pod Jack you'll have ever seen.
I've never seen you in a polo shirt in my life. I can't even imagine what that looked like.
We're seeing each other on Friday. We're recording this on a Tuesday and we're seeing each other Friday. There is a strong likelihood you'll see me in a polo shirt.
Oh, I can't wait for polo shirt, Jack. I have a feeling you'd speak differently as well. I'll get in the car, but hi!
I project. Polo makes me project.
Oh, good Lord. I'm going to projectile vomit.
I become all the things that, you'd hate about me.
You tend to that like we're just really well-rounded, everything's great, middle-class guy, just like yeah, the economy, this weather, huh? Like that kind of dude. You that guy? Yeah, you're an estate agent, aren't you? Hiding in plain sight. Oh my god. Oh,
sorry.
Fucking hell, what a letdown. Anyway, we'll get to that pending disappointment later. Well, I'm very excited to see you as always. We're here to talk about Amon Amarth. Now, Jack, what's your level of familiarity with Amon Amarth's material?
That'd be a strong 0. This is the first dive I have taken.
Oh my god! So you had no earthly idea. So at what point did you start to realise what Amon Amarth were going to sound like? Did you look at the notes and the cover art and that type of stuff? Talk us through the learning process.
Sure. I mean, I will say in terms of they're a name that's been bandied about in the metal scene for as long as I can remember.
Yes.
Like everyone knows who or knows of. Oh, there's that band Amon Amarth. Lots of people talk about them. And as I've learned from the press notes, they've actually been a band since 1992, which is 1, the year I was born, and 2, a year before you were born.
Yes.
Ish.
Yeah. Well, yes, it is. It is
it is, because time is time, and that's
it's not like fucking something that was negotiable.
For those listening that don't know Sam's birthday, and shame on you.
All the cards from all the listeners I'm just missing out on.
Damn, why don't you know that? But it's on New Year's Day, so that's I don't know. I feel like it's
pertinent information. Well, you just give them my fucking address and debit card number next time.
It is entirely a different year, though. Anyway, my point being, finding out that they've been going on that long.
You just described 1993 in comparison to 1992 as an entirely different year.
It was.
It was like one era ended in 1992 and another began. And between which Amon Amarth was born.
Yeah, they were. Anyway, that's mental. So I found that out in the press notes, which was both surprising and unsurprising, I think. Don't know where I sit between the two. In terms of how long it took me to understand what I was going into, but the cover art gave it away pretty quickly. It was very Viking, very quick. And then, about 0.4 seconds into the first song, I was like, okay, here we go. This is what we're in for now.
Yeah, I actually saw Amon Amarth supporting Slayer in 2007.
Yeah.
And they were being described as an up-and-coming band at the time. although clearly they've been around for 15 years. So I
I
don't.
mean,
I
apologies
also
if I've got that wrong, but I'm like 90% sure I read that. Maybe I'll look at
so
you.
like
Carry on. I'll look
yeah. So I saw them off that Twilight of the Thunder God era, which is like one of their bigger tunes. It's a banger. It's absolute classic, and they were brilliant. They were doing that mutual headbanging in circle thing, including the drummer, which I thought was just extraordinary.
that's sick.
It's just some fucking commitment, honestly. But yeah, so me and Chris reviewed Amon Amarth's last album a couple of years ago. I want to say 2020, 2019, that sort of range. And we sort of went in with a similar attitude that I'm going to now. There's a value to bands like Amon Amarth here, and they obviously serve a certain niche, but also they also serve it in not in the Alastorm way, because Alastorm are whack and they're really cringy and embarrassing.
I don't know if they're Alastorm or they're Ailstorm, but I've always presumed it's Ailstorm. And the fact that you call them like Alastorm as if you're like, oh, it's Alastorm. I don't know who's right there.
Oh God,
you've thrown me now. And I feel like you've probably called them that for like a long time.
Yeah, it felt very comfortable for me to say.
Oh, you just came right out the gates and said that.
Yeah, just went straight for Alastorm. Although now I realised I really sound silly. The more you repeat it, the worse it gets. Alastorm makes it sound like it's like it's two words.
Yeah, who's that guy over there? It's Alastorm Jones.
Oh
no, man. You
know? Yeah, it might be Ailstorm. Either way, everyone knows
Ailstorm. Just to make it really fucking clear for the listeners, Ailstorm are shite. And if they want to fight,
like if you want to find different pronunciations of that,
or Shataya Storm, as Sam might call them, if he decides to. To go back to my fact check for you, Sam, Amon Amarth are a Swedish melodic death metal band from Tumba.
Where's that? Tumba.
They formed in 92, so I was correct on that.
I
think they're Swedish. Yeah, Swedish.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, Tumba. And actually, just another interesting fact for you while we're here is that the band takes its name from the cindering name of Mount Doom, the volcano in the one and only Lord of the Rings.
Oh, that's interesting.
I instantly like them more now, actually.
Yeah, well, the big Lord of the Rings fans over here, so that's an immediate win. It's an immediate win. But yeah, like the world needs bands like Amon Amarth. The metal world needs bands like Amon Amarth because there is a niche and there is a crowd for this, and they're perfectly suited as a fan service. The fact that, by the way, they described as Swedish melodic death metal, and at no point they've put Swedish Viking themed melodic death metal seems insane to me.
It's
like just sprinkle it in there. Come on, it's got to be part of the first sentence of the bio, surely. Yeah. But the fact that they're doing this with regularity and they're doing this with some real consistency speaks to the sort of impact they're having, really how good they are at this, because they've been, I want to say, the archetypal medieval themed or Viking era themed band really since they became famous. I've never really came across a band that does it as well as consistently, or with as much just insane regularity as Amon Amarth. I feel like they've had like 12 to 15 albums, and they're all like 7 to 8 out of 10 metal albums within this theme. Me and Pew reviewed Sabaton earlier this year. It was the same sort of thing. Like you looked at their history and it's like, holy shit, these guys have been doing this for 20 years and they're just doing concept album after concept album about an apocalypse or a world war. And they're just raking in the fans, just raking them in, just railing them in, just unbelievable. It's hard not to respect them. That's the tone I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with overwhelming positivity for this because I do actually like them quite a lot. Where do you sit with this?
Yeah, I love it, actually. I found it a really enjoyable listen.
Okay.
And I mean, one of my questions to you were, well, maybe not for you, but as more of a fan, you're the most qualified of the two of us. Is this like other albums, or is this okay? Because I was listening to it and I was actually really impressed by, like, within their genre, obviously, and what they're trying to go for, the diversity in what they were doing. you know, and it would be, I think from the explanation given so far, or what I had in my mind, is this was going to be very one track, one pace, one tempo, one thing. And what they do within their genre is actually a lot more than that. You know, there's so it, and this felt like an album that they were playing around. It felt like they were sort of embracing their creative side. So it was interesting for me, having this being the very first dive. I haven't, you know, we looked at like Coheed, for example. I'd at least had some understanding, some you know, some of the back catalogue I'd listened to before. Same with Alexia on Fire, you know, but this was zero, absolute zero. I've never put on an Amon Amarth song in my life.
Yeah, I like checking in with them from point to point, and I like finding it kind of reassuring. It's like an old TV show, or like a long running radio host, or a familiar podcast, and it's like checking in every couple of years and being like, oh, they're still going, they're still doing their thing. Isn't that nice? The world's still turning. Amon Amarth are still talking about Odin's sword, and we can move forward, and that's good for everybody. But if we actually break this down, this is a really good metal album. Like jokes aside or anything like that, any sort of like side eye references and that type of stuff. And like I've got no issue whatsoever. I'll just go straight up out of it and say I've got no issue with metal mixing with nerd culture and metal mixing with history and sort of all these stuff coming together. I'm a person with a fucking map from a Pokemon game on my wall. Like, it would just be insane for me to point and sort of criticize any kind of other interest that is pursued as a theme. They clearly see it as part of their like historic identity and cultural capital and all this type of stuff, and explore that through these class metal tunes. And the moment it starts, get in the ring, I was like, within 30 seconds, I was like, I fucking love heavy metal. Like, I just love it. There was just a bit where this slow riff was kicking. There was just that hammer and that kind of bell in the midst of the breakdown. And I was just like, yeah, man, sometimes we overthink it. Sometimes we overthink metal and we think it needs to be these like intricately layered and wonderfully serpentine things. And I'm like that, and I love that, and I love talking about that, and I love saying how great it is, and I love asking bands why they don't do more of that and wondering when the next thing they're going to do that sounds like that is. And I get it. However, sometimes it's really nice just to sit back and listen to just some good riffs, some well-structured tunes. It's like sometimes you're watching a foreign language film that's got an Oscar nomination and it's really interesting, but you have to work at it. Or you're watching that Christopher Nolan film where the boats start going backwards and you wonder halfway through what the fuck's going on. And sometimes you want to just watch Thor, and sometimes you want to just watch a Marvel film, and sometimes you want to watch Harry Potter, and you want to sink in to an enjoyable sort of parallel reality that you're sort of taken into, and it doesn't sort of stress you out as much. And I feel that this does that in a very weird sense. I find like a level of soothing reassurance, which probably makes me a sociopath considering the type of music that it is. I find a level of reassurance from sitting down and listening to these very nicely structured, really well sewn up, really beautifully produced, fucking banging heavy metal songs. In this opener, it really kicks off that vibe.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Is it any surprise to you, Sam, that they made that song for a wrestler?
No, it is not. No, it is not.
There's an AEW pro wrestler called Eric Redbeard. Or that's his, you know, that's the name he goes by. And I wrote, this is not a surprise. That's sort of, I actually did also write.
I can already see him.
Yeah.
Like,
if he's not ginger, there's no point. I'll tell you that for nothing.
Shirtless.
Tight pants.
Leather arm, like wristbands, the ones that kind of go up to halfway up your forearm. Necklace. He's got some kind of finisher move that involves punching himself in the chest. And like, I'm pretty sure I saw 7 of these dudes in a bar in Wolverhampton not too long ago. And they were all sort of exactly what I imagined Eric Redbeard looks like. It is perfect. Oh, please describe him to me.
I mean, please. we're a little bit off, but not entirely.
Right. Is his beard actually red? Is he ginger?
He's ginger as fuck, man.
Oh dear lords.
For those of you on an audio platform right now, I'm showing Sam a picture of Eric Redbeard. I mean, he's got a bit of a Stone Cold Austin type vibe.
Yeah, Stone Cold Austin got lost then on mine.
I realised I missed out the Steve. I don't know why I missed out the Steve on Stone Cold Steve Austin there. So obviously a tired boy. Might be hard for you to see there, but
No, that pretty much does the trick. Sleeveless leather jacket, very heavy metal looking t-shirt on underneath, very heavily tattooed,
very angry boy. Yeah,
very large individual.
Big man.
Yeah, entirely makes sense.
I also just wrote by this song, 15-year-old Jack would love this. I just want to fight everyone to this song.
Yeah, it's got that real sort of pulsing sort of mid-tempo pace, isn't it, as well? And the rest of the album throughout, like sort of the opening tracks. We'll just take a look at some of the notes I was writing for this. I was just like I was just describing like meals I enjoyed. I was just like, oh yeah, this is good. Like the Great Heathen Army is just a classic Amon Amarth song. But obviously, like they have one of these on every album. Like it's the mid-tempo, fist to the air. It's got that punching rhythm. Yeah, do you know what I mean?
100%.
It's got this big sort of call and response kind of chorus that's really, really well suited to what I'd imagine would be a great live performance. Fans sort of calling back the Great Heathen Army part of the big chorus.
Made the beat down at the start of it as well. It was just like,
yeah, really, it just really
came
nice.
in and then left, but it was just perfectly. And I noticed they do little things like that.
Yeah, they do. They toy with the genres a little bit.
And what I loved about this is like it was that very chant style group vocal type chorus. You know, something that people can really get behind live, like you were saying. But also, I loved in comparison, because I wasn't entirely sure what I was expecting at this point. That was starkly different to the first song. Get in the Ring had the kind of the guitar line as the main bit of melody, because you don't get clean vocals. So the differentiation for the chorus in particular, they rely quite heavily on the guitar for it. So for them then to go to like this, it felt like quite, they're two worlds apart in terms of what you're getting and what they're using and how they're using it in terms of what's at their disposal. So I love that. At this point, I was feeling like, oh wow, like between these two here, like it's not like one track at all. I'm stoked.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with that, and I think as well that they do sort of slip into other genres as part of the way to sort of diversify the music. And I agree with that. If you listen to the next couple of songs, actually, you listen to Hydron, which I think I've kind of tried to pronounce correctly. And thank you very much. They're that straight out of the Iron Maiden book. That gallop at the start, that kind of that just classic sort of tempo. We've even got between that and the next couple of songs, between Hydron, Odin Owns, and Find a Way or Make One. Some of the musicianship here is incredibly impressive. The drum work on Odin Owns right at the start, absolutely amazing. And there's a bit in Find a Way or Make One where it's just the standard fist in the air, big punchy, but then there's like these beautiful, really beautiful guitar harmonies, like near the second half of it, that are just glittering. And it's like, wow, where the fuck did this come from? And it's really, really, really nice. And then they just go back to stomping on your head for a bit. But like that in the midst, it's just superb. It really, really enjoys it. And it really, you're right, it just separates. And they know what they're doing. They know what room they're in. They know what they're capable of. It is riff, it is big chorus. And then they're able to pull away from it for a little bit and really offer this sort of moment of sort of transcendent beauty and that type of stuff. And then sort of head right back in. Like they're very sort of clued into what they're able to produce, what their audience wants, what they're able to produce for their audience. And even when there's harmonies and when there's nice sections, there's an element of sort of like metallic sensibility. There's always that heaviness. There's always that kind of even with guitar harmonies, it's like a classic heavy metal guitar harmony going on, very sort of Judas Priest, very sort of UFO, Thin Lizzy, that type of stuff. And I'm big fan of that. And you hear like Dawn of Norsemen, the next tune, which is really melodic. The central figure's really nice. Where do you sit on this mid portion of the album?
Yeah, it's great. They've got their tropes, which I'm already starting to pick up at this point.
Yeah.
But they don't rely on any individual one of them too much. And that's what made it feel quite, I felt it was quite fresh. I didn't find myself at any point, even in this midsection, thinking, "Oh, okay, now come on." I felt like I was looking forward to the next thing that I might hear. Hydrum was this epic, chuggy, bouncy, mammoth of a song, and I was sat there thinking, this sounds so much like what Parkway Drive wanted to do on Ire and Beyond. It feels like he was trying to embody some of that real, like, particularly in vocally, because it's that interesting style of vocal, isn't it, where it's their growls, it's heavy vocal lines, it's dark vocal lines. He captures some real sort of snarl in his voice, but he doesn't, but it's very understandable. We're talking about a death metal band that you can understand what he's saying for the large part.
Yes.
For parts of it, at least. Loved that. Odin Owns You All is another one. It's a heavy one. I love there was these changes in pace as it dropped from section to section, where it would go sort of half time at one point and then kick back in, and that broke it up nicely for me. There was some lead guitar lines in that as well, particularly towards the end of the song, that they just drop in. They're just kind of, like you'd said, they just sprinkle the song with them, and it's like, oh, that kind of felt a bit new, felt a bit creative. You're right though, like between them, I think and what I'm picking up, that kind of Amon Amarth trope that carries through them is that kind of fist pump in the air sensibility that you'd have at a live show. And all of them have that real togetherness and that real sort of ability to probably command a crowd. I loved Find a Way or Make One. I thought it was more uplifting. It was quite bouncy. Yeah. I got more Volbeat sort of vibes from some of the verse structures in it, but heavier, obviously. I like that in the verse on that, it felt like the drummer held back a little bit. Yeah, check me noticing a drummer thing. And I just wrote, he got a little jazzy with it, you know? The drums got a little tinkly, that and not so much, not so much of the beaty and more the tinkly. In my professional opinion.
I'm sure he's really pleased to hear that.
Yeah. So if you're listening, which we
probably
know you are,
like Storm Thunder or something.
Yeah. He said, "I is tinkly, no heavy, no." I also just want to make a public service announcement apology to anyone.
Just get it out of the way. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone on the podcast apologize so quickly for an attempt at an accent. But yeah, I don't think I've ever instantly regretted something so much as I have on that. And I'm gonna continue on. The solo in that song is also, and I was like surprised. I was like, they haven't dropped a solo yet, really?
Yeah. Actually, there's a minimum amount of massive sort of lengthy sort of guitar work going on here. They seem very much percussive and rhythmic band. It just seems to suit their sound much better. I also want to shout out the vocals on this are just perfect.
Brilliant.
Like, considering the type of music they're putting together, you couldn't actually like put a vocalist together better if you built one out of a lab than Johan Hegg is his name.
What a guy.
And if you've seen pictures of them, none of them look like people you'd want to meet in a dark alley at all. And Johan Hegg looks exactly the way he sounds.
But you know they're going to be the nicest human beings you've ever met.
Oh, 100%. That's always the Scandinavian way. They're always like 6 feet tall and lovely. Just like terrifying and really polite. It's just fantastic. What a wonderful region. And just superb. It's just absolutely perfect. I feel as well like modern metal eventually swings back towards this consistency over and over and over and over again. What you tend to get is the bigger bands get, the more they sink towards this kind of powerful, easy to replicate, or easy to at least sing along to or nod along to, instantly resonating type sound. And we're hearing it now. Like Amon Amarth are doing this type of music that clearly, figuratively and otherwise, strikes a massive chord with its own fan base, and they know exactly who they're trying to appeal to. know exactly who they're trying to appeal to, and it works. It works really, really beautifully. Here's some of the last few songs on this record. I mean, Saxons and Vikings. I mean, did you even need to listen to this before knowing how this was going to fucking sound? I mean, it's exactly what you'd expected it would be, isn't it?
Between those two, so the one before that's the Dawn of Norseman, and then Saxon.
Yeah.
They both sound like they're like the boss level on a Sega game. Except they're both fucking pummeling. And there's like, I'm sure there's I can't remember the YouTuber's name, and probably people on TikTok now doing it as well, where they'll like turn either popular music or game music or whatever into like heavy metal. There's a I'd do some shout outs, but I can't remember what they're called. But it sounds like that. It sounds like they've taken something like from the Sonic soundtrack and turned it into like an epic song. But Saxons and Vikings, I mean, you talk about different as well. I mean, it was thrashy in comparison to the others. It picked up the pace big time. And who the fuck features on it? Or is that one of the guys in the band? Because
See, that's an excellent question.
I couldn't find that in the press notes, so.
No, neither could I. I'm not entirely sure.
I mean,
I've got to believe it's somebody else, because if they've been hiding a melodic vocalist in their midst for like 27 albums, and they've just thrust him out for the second third of this new album, their 12th record or something like that, and they're like, hey, here he is, and then I need to know what cupboard they found him in, but I'm assuming that was brought in, because you're right, it's not actually in the
it's
press
someone
notes.
that loves Iron Maiden.
100%, or may have been in Iron Maiden at various points.
Who knows? But the back and forth between them, because I love a feature where they make the most out of the person that they've got. And I will say, I mean, if it is one of the guys in the band, that's one, absurd, and two, a great use of them at this time. So that's the most backhanded and amazing compliment I can give. But it sounds brilliant. The way that they use that feature or use that vocal or whatever to do that back and forth. The part where there's like the vocalists going at each other. One will do one line, the other one does. They like that call and response type back and forth. It's so cool. And that happens for like a large portion of the song as well. It's not like a drop and it's done. I absolutely loved it. That's my favorite song on the album. I absolutely loved it. And then they drop a solo in, and it feels a little messier. It's got a little bit of, a bit of snarl about it. It was cool. That's a cool track at that point in the album.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. If you're on let's say, I don't think it's even relevant to even do, but just in case, I'll do this just for the record. If you're on a Amon Amarth album, you're on an Amon Amarth album, just saying that. If you're an Amon Amarth fan and you're wondering what this Amon Amarth album sounds like, and you have any lingering anxieties about what it's going to sound like, if you liked any of the last 11, you're going to be absolutely fine. You're going to be absolutely fine. This is going to do it for you. It's exactly what you'd want. It's going to get them back out on tour, and it's doing exactly what you want for them. And by the way, I'm seeing Amon Amarth with Chris supporting Machine Head later this year, and I'm very excited. Legitimately, that's going to be such a night of just heavy metal and headbanging and riffs and stuff. And they're right, like between 2008's Twilight of the Thunder God, 2016's Jomsving, I think I'm pronouncing that wrong, if not, I'm probably butchering it. Those are two really good albums. Berserker in 2020 was really, really good, and this one is really, really good as well. And they've achieved a level of consistency that is tough to maintain in metal. And we need bands like this. Me and Chris used to have this argument all the fucking time, and till finally we had like a year in 2020 when all these old bands came out with great albums. Like we had Cannibal Corpse, we had At the Gates, and all this sort of stuff. Carcass came out of fucking nowhere, and it's like you need this, because while everyone else is trying to reinvent yourself, you need those bands that are just fucking plugged in and consistent and reward their fans and keep everything communal and play for the live experience. And Amon Amarth are absolutely one of those bands. And I'm glad they're still knocking around. I love that metal still has a part of it that's like this. I love that that's not going away.
I think just to round up the last few tracks on the album as well, there's just some really cool parts that stuck out to me on some. There's that song called Skaggle Rides With Me, which by the way is one of the best titles to a song ever. Sam, that intro with that halftime drumming that kicks in is
sensational,
absolutely sensational. And some of the vocal lines in that were matched by the riff, like they were imitated. at the same time. It was cool. I just love the way they just played around with this. I just felt it was, that track in particular felt like it hadn't happened before. It felt intuitive. It felt great. And then it's Serpent Trail is the song that kind of, I mean, I wrote nasty, but wrote nasty with an R in it. Like, that's fucking nasty.
Nasty.
And it builds, it feels dark. It's got that kind of like riffy breakdown to open it. That echoey guitar sort of opens it. And then in that, there's a bit of spoken word. He has this kind of dark tone when he talks.
Yeah.
Very much. And then it kicks back
in. It's a bit black metal near the end as well, because it's like slow and methodical and building up and stuff.
But it still feels within theme. It doesn't feel like it's kind of just, we'll plonk that on the end and it'll be a bit jarring. No, it all felt cohesive as a record. But yeah, I can't talk highly enough of it. I mean, you know, that's the for someone that's not a melodic death metal fan, it's the best melodic death metal band and album I've heard, because I've heard very little / none. But well done, Amon Amarth. Yeah, I thought they were brilliant. I think you'd put Amon Amarth on. I can't remember whether they're playing this year Bloodstock, but you put them on at Bloodstock, they're going to be a staple memory. That'll be an event, and that'll be memorable because Amon Amarth were there. You could put them as main support for Parkway Drive, and they would have the crowd going mental. And I think they're the sort of band that you'd look at with what I hope would be that finesse and that professionalism and that just consistently brilliant sound. And that would be, I think they'd still be pulling fans in from metalcore, from heavy metal, from old, from new. Yeah, I think it's really impressive what they've managed to do by not necessarily expanding into anything worlds away from how they started, but also it just feels like they perfected it. I really enjoyed this record.
So have I, and I'm looking forward to the next one. And I openly wonder what it'll sound like. You know, just
I could tell you, and I'll love it.
Yeah, it's just absolutely terrific. All right, if you're an Amon Amarth album fan, Amon Amarth fan and you bloody hell, if you're a fan of Amon Amarth and you are looking forward to the album, your nerves should be calm. You should be strong and resolute. Be firm, bold, bloody and resolute, like the witches in Macbeth tell Macbeth.
We shall take the heathens together. We will fight the army as one.
It's guys, honestly, this is one of the all-time. These are one of the all-time great gym bands as well. If you just want to put on a record and just pump some iron and or do some cardio and just stare angrily out of the window, then this is the band for you. I can't imagine that if you just listen to enough of Amon Amarth, you won't be like stacked in like a year and a bit. But that brings us.
You be prepared very quickly. Sorry, Sam. You might also just shout at random people, like sort of Viking sort of, you know. Oh, it's like, you know, oh, bro, can you just spot me on this? And you'd be like, yes, brother, lock shields with me one more time and let us lift together. You know, I feel like that would be the only way that I could communicate if I listened to too much of this. So maybe I need to. I've done it like 5 times on the podcast already. Anyway, you were doing the outro. I've been nothing but disruptive this evening.
It's been okay. It's okay. I like the image that you just start shouting in random parts of conversation because you can't control your enthusiasm. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, yes! It's like at various points halfway through a meal. We have more salt. Yeah! It's just, but not, I like just.
Oh, the line is falling. We must fall back. Brethren, sisters, brothers, come with me. Everyone else in the gym's just like, what the fuck is like that? He's on the fucking leg press, you know.
Who's this for? Yes. Why? What's he training to feet? Yeah. Unbelievable. Got the calves of a lion though. It's just extraordinary. But yes, I'm going to bring us to the end of this before we say anything else that's just outrageously stupid. So that brings us to another episode of the Noizze Podcast, sponsored by the Noizze Podcast Network. I'd like to thank Jack for joining us. I'd like to thank the boys in Amon Amarth for putting together another brilliant album. I'd like to thank everybody that continues to listen to us, like and subscribe to us. Please follow us at Noizze Podcast on Twitter, at Noizze UK on Twitter. Please follow us at Noizze UK on YouTube. Please give us a like and subscribe on Spotify. Please give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Music. Please follow us on Facebook. Please drop us a like, Twitter recommendation, comment, anything like that. Tell us your favorite melodic Swedish death metal records. Maybe you tell us your favorite Viking album that isn't by Amon Amarth. That would be interesting. Then I can start throwing them at Jack and hoping that he just starts attacking passers-by at random points during his week. Just let us know if you need absolutely anything at all. We'll look forward to speaking with you guys again about whatever the hell is coming up in the Noizze world. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. And now coming up is my interview with Sam from Ithaca. And we discuss everything from their new album, When They Fear Us, that was out on July the 29th. And it is fucking sick, by the way. Check it out. I'm here with Sam, the fantastic guitarist from Ithaca, who's just released their new second sophomore album. That was a tongue twister. It's just come out on the 29th of June called Thank you very much. Called They Fear Us. So it's been out pretty much nearly a week now. What's been the initial response? What's the vibe you're getting back? How are you feeling about it? What's the sort of messages you've been receiving?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's really overwhelming. I mean, first of all, just to put it out there, like to thank you and Will for an incredibly kind review, because that was absolutely one of the band's favorites. That one did big numbers in our WhatsApp chat because it was so lovely. And the fact that you did such a deep dive on it was so moving and meant so much. It's been incredible. I mean, honestly, like it's been a little bit overwhelming, to be honest. I've been telling people it's kind of a bit like being hit with an emotional like 18-wheeler. Like it's sort of, we were just sat there sort of chilling, it felt a bit like, and we were like, oh, here's some videos, here's some stuff, and people were like, oh yeah, that's cool. And then now it's like, blah, like, woo, love the album, and like, which is so nice, but also a bit nuts. My favorite things about the last week have been, obviously, apart from just like leaving aside all the incredibly nice comments and just people being lovely and all that sort of stuff, mainly it's a couple of things. Firstly, that people are really like connecting with the album. People really get what we were trying to do. People really get the ideas behind the album, and yeah, people feel like we've had a lot of comments that people are feeling very like seen by the album. They're feeling represented by the album, which as you know, as you guys know from as you can tell from the interview and all the other stuff, you know, you understand that's a big part of why we bother doing this. People are up for like the weird, some of the weird musical choices. You know, people didn't like. I thought people were going to be a lot more sniffy about us having a power ballad than they have been. But they weren't. They were like, yeah, this fits. You know, they get like that is really amazing that people use words like cohesive to describe the album, and you know, it's not just that they like it, it's that they feel like the album kind of works as a thing. And I think like, yeah, it's doing a little bit of like tapping on the door of some slightly more mainstream publications, you know, like getting the Guardian stuff and, you know, doing Kerrang cover, and well, and by the time this comes out, hopefully another big publication, like the kind of implement a farmer might use to move some hay, will hopefully be giving us a review. And so yeah, I think like to us that's incredibly validating, because that's also part of the point, you know, like we wanted to look different and sound different to every other metal band in our scene, and it feels like we've done a decent stab at it. So yeah, it's been great. That's fun.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear you got sort of get the positivity back, the clear the effort you put into the album. So obviously, Language of Intro came out in 2019, and the sophomore was always a stereotypically difficult album for a band to come across, especially one that was successful like yourself, interacting with the fan base, and then you always have the classic band conversation amongst yourself. I assume, do we continue with what has clearly worked? Do we develop? What do we want to be in our next album? What do we want the whole thing to sound like? So what I'm asking you really is, how did those conversations happen? What was and obviously we know the end product now, but I'm more interested in what led to it really. What were the conversations where, right, what we want this album to sound like this, we want this to be different, because it is markedly different. What were the conversations and the sort of discussions you were having between as a group, and how did that actually wind up being the production that it was, the songwriting process that it became?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the way I've been talking about it is, I think it's a mixture of like, there was a mixture of like hyper intentional and very, very organic and very loose. So there was there's one point, I mean, I don't know if this is interesting for people to hear about, but there was this point quite early, you know, it was sort of summer during, I think, just after lockdown 1 or something, and we had a little writing session. It was kind of our first time, a couple of us even being in a room together, and we were playing around, and I had a couple of riffs locked in, like the opening riff in the way, and some other breakdowns that we use, and some other bits where it was like, yeah, metalcore, like we're back, good riffs, here we go. And I was playing around with the clean bit at the beginning of You Should Have Gone Back, and I was like, I really like this, but I just don't know, I can't think of where to take this. It's sort of a bit mastodon-y, and it's a bit like fluid and sci-fi and spacey, but it's kind of going nowhere. And then James, our drummer, he was just like, what if we did like a big stadium rock bit? And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, oh, go 70s, like go 70s, just big stadium rock. And I was like, interesting, do you mean like this? And then we sort of like, I did like a big stupid Prince like pick scrape, and then so we worked on that solo, and then that was the moment where and everyone and all the guys were like, yeah, this kind of thing, and it was like very, you know, it's what the makings of what is now on the record, you know, a big camp sort of stadium rock solo, Prince, Purple Rain section. And as soon as Lewis kind of fired the starting gun on that and everyone was vibing with it, that gave me the license to be like, okay, I can get, like, the guys are up for really going like outside the box here. And then that was when I started to play around with like Hold Be Held and some of the other stuff. Like the first ideas started to come there, because I was like, no, I can really like do what I want here, and we can really be so much braver. Then on the other side, as that stuff started to develop, we started to realize like, oh, there are some really strong common themes here, and there is a real flow, and there's like a real consistency of ideas. So why don't we actually build out more of a concept for the record? And that's where like the look came from, really. We really sat down to like mood board the look and the videos, and like all of that came from the kind of central like They Fear Us kind of concept. And that's when things got very like followed a clear creative process where we were like brainstorming with each other. Whereas a lot, yeah, as I say, some of the other stuff, you know, like Hold Beheld, I just sort of came, just had an idea like, oh, what if we do like a sort of 90s new edition Michael Bolton power ballad thing? And I just wrote it in my loft during one of the lockdowns and sent it to the guys, and they were like, yes, but can we like do this and this and this? And then what you hear as the final product came out. So yeah, if that answers your question, a real mix of like, and we also did like writing retreats where we had this like really focused time to kind of build things out rather than having like bitty bits. We took that concentrated time to like really create together and really vibe off each other as well.
No, I think that's terrific. Obviously, it's clear that it's having that impact on that the creation of something that's this overall thing that needs to flow, rather than you get some records that you can tell, all right, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's just one after the other, and it's very staccato, very sort of stripped down, that we have 3 singles and the rest will write in like 6 months or something like that. And it's good, it's clear that you sort of had this sort of progressive approach. Did that feed into the ideas and some of the themes and the lyricism as well? Because I noticed that obviously you've talked about the mood, you've talked about the sort of general perception of the band that you want to portray, and sort of hinted at some of the social commentary that's sort of occurring a little bit stronger in this second album. Was that something that you discussed as, we want to hit this overall theme and we're going to have a lot of these interconnected ideas that sort of relate to this overall theme? Or did it, like you talked about with the songwriting, was that a more organic process as well?
Yeah, that was more like, because of lockdown, actually, it was a bit more like we were like the guys in the band and then Jamila were kind of a bit like not isolated from each other, because she would come to all the writing retreats, but also like she was a lot of the time in the writing retreat, she was just like thinking. She wasn't actually necessarily contributing to like, this should be this and this should be this. She was just like mapping out things in her head and playing around with ideas. And so like we didn't really get some of the lyrics I didn't hear until the studio, to be honest. Like some of them, you know, because we never had time to really practice them, you know, like when we recorded last August, you know, it's hard to think of now, but you know, and we were quite strict as a band about lockdown requirements and rule of 6 and everything, and like being in a room together. So everything was quite late when we actually got fully built things out. So some of that stuff was before, like They Fear Us title and things like that came like quite a long time before. But like Fluorescent, for example, which is definitely like the most emotionally devastating of the songs, we didn't hear the lyrics until we got into the studio, and that was like a complete gut punch. And but it was still like, it still met the overarching theme that we were building out, if you see what I mean. So I don't know if this has answered your question at all. Sorry, it's
No,
just
it's
like,
okay.
It was like, I think also they fed off each other, like the music being more like having elements of more like, not just like camp, but like more like femininity, intimacy, other tones and emotions beyond rah rah rah. I think fed into gave Jamila license to do a lot more cleans, and that fed into the femininity and the divine feminine power. Do you know what I mean? They kind of really
absolutely. Yeah, it appears that you've sort of hit on like a little bit of a juxtaposition between the way that sort of society is constructed and the way that you kind of want to break it down. Totally. And that dark and light kind of blend is finding itself nicely in the music.
Totally.
Getting all very English teacher and metaphorical on you there, but
for sure.
Listen, when we review the album, I had the contention that it felt like the album was split into three. So you had the opening record, the opening portion of the record was almost like a classic modern metalcore. This is as if you asked me to pan out what I thought the next Ithaca album would sound like, those opening three songs are kind of in the, there's a lot of like discords, a lot of like fast-paced stuff. Yeah, it's got the classic breakdown sort of blueprint. The second one felt like you'd all be listening to Every Time I Die and punching each other for about half a year. And then the third section is like you mentioned, it's just completely emotive discourse, completely different, completely just really beautiful. Like Will mentioned that he was like personally sort of moved, like listening to the record, which is beautiful, absolutely incredible. Just that it had that impact. Those three segments being put together that way, was that accidental? Is that, have we hit on something like a deliberate thing that you did with the track listing, or how far off are we?
No, I absolutely loved the way you highlighted that in the review, and actually a few people have reflected that back to us, that it kind of moves in these sort of acts, and I think in a way that was less intentional, to be honest. What we were really trying to do was never let you get too comfortable in one groove anywhere in the album, and also like, this is such, I don't know if this is a stupid analogy, but to me, when I'm really in my best creative zone with the riffs, because that's the big part of what I bring to the band, it's when we really feel like we're like it's like we're cooking, so we're like cutting through the sweetness, or like the balance of flavor, or do you know what I mean, like something, it's like, this feels a bit like, this is getting too like sweet, it needs some spicy, or this is getting too like, this is just a bit too like, now it needs something to like even it out. And so we thought really carefully, we had lots and lots of chats about the sequencing in the album to make sure it flowed really cleanly and really well, and that you were never bored of any one idea, and also the kind of it does follow a narrative arc of like taking you down to the very sort of depths of aggression, and then like you come out on the other side, and that is where the kind of, all the ideas that we're trying to communicate about them, healing from your trauma being possible, because that's my experience of therapy. And I think a couple of us, if they don't mind me saying, a couple of the band members' experience of therapy is like, you have to really go into the most like aggressive, raw, and like painful and vulnerable place of yourself before you come to this, like, you're sort of this wounded animal, and then you start to rebuild from that place. So it made a lot of sense, and like I think like having that, like, it's also, to be honest, we also wanted to warm people up to the idea that like, okay, don't worry, like, we're still a metal band, we still do riffs, we still do mosh bits, but like, we're gonna take you somewhere a bit crazy now. And I think it would have been weird if we tried to front load any of the weird stuff, because I think people just wouldn't have felt like we'd earned it.
No, I understand that. It's interesting that you touch on that a little bit. How much does fan discourse play into the songwriting discussion process? Because some bands get kind of, I've asked this question before, and some bands get really touchy about this question. Sometimes I go, well, not at all. We just produce our creative thing, and then you know what I mean? We put it out there and whatever. Like, okay, all right, Quentin Tarantino, like, it's cool. But like, obviously you've hinted at something there, which has allowed me to feel brave enough to ask the question. Surely fan response has to play into part of what you're producing, right?
Yeah, the media line, such as there is, oh, we only make music for ourselves. I mean, and there is some truth to that. Like, obviously, we wouldn't have a power ballad on the record if we didn't think, like, because we like that music and that's why we make it. But I think we're fans of our own music, to be honest, if that doesn't sound arrogant. Like this is the music we make is the music that we want to listen to and we think is cool. And so of course, like, fan response comes into that, because we are also putting it out into the world with the understanding that we feel like there are other people who also think all of these influences and these styles and these directions are cool as well. Really, for me, like, the thing with the response from listeners is it's two things. It's one, it's just like, I think people just need to have a day off and just like embrace the like joy of the fact that your art is resonating with people. And just like if you can't see that joy, you will never find joy in your creative endeavors. You'll never enjoy being in a band. And like it's really, I can say it's super tempting when you're in a band to be incredibly competitive, to constantly think like, what are these people doing that we're not? Like, what are we getting wrong? How do we be better? Blah, 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 you know, and just constantly be blinkered by ambition and a sense of like, what's next and what's next and what's next. And rarely do you stop and take stock of like the things that you've achieved. And so that is the benefit, I think, of people responding to your art, is that it becomes real and it becomes alive. And also, like, I think you know, a big part of this band is about, as we're constantly banging on about in interviews, is about offering people something new, and not just to, you know, we think that we're kind of enriching the scene, like, if that doesn't sound too arrogant, because we are offering something new, a bit new and a bit different. You know, we're trying to add something, we're trying to contribute, however much you think we actually are or aren't. And there's something much more intentional, which, as you know, we're very passionate about, which is the idea that people who don't look like or sound like or seem like other people in the scene have access to this music as well. Because, you know, like, people of color, working class people, women, whoever, trans people, whoever, have this full palette of emotions just as we do. It's just that this world has felt closed off to them before, or it's felt more closed until very recently. And so I think if you're not considering how your art is your music or your whatever is responded to through the lens of like, how can we enrich the overall environment that we're in? How can we make our scene better? How can we make it more inclusive? How can we make the art fundamentally more interesting? I think then you are a little bit just making music for yourself, and you're not thinking about like progression or like change or like new things happening. You know, I'd like to think that, like, particularly in the UK scene, they definitely are, but, you know, all the bands who are our peers are thinking about like, how can we make heavy music more interesting and cool and like vibrant? You know, they're not just thinking like, oh, we make music for ourselves. It's like, yeah, you do make music for yourself, but like, if you're not thinking at least like beyond the walls of your creativity, then I think that's a bit of a shame, to be honest.
No, I completely agree with that. I think you're absolutely right. You've got to consider audience participation as part of what you're trying to do. Audience sort of that cathartic sort of. You can't have a cathartic experience if it's entirely singular. Like, it seems by definition completely wasted.
Sure.
And I think life has to imitate art in that way, where we kind of see artists breaking boundaries, and then society mimics it because they've seen it, and then it becomes this, you know that sort of thing. So comedians and artists and that sort of stuff.
Culture shift, exactly. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, you absolutely no. Of course, I was just agreeing with you essentially. So we're talking about your sort of role in the band. We're talking about you as guitarist. So I want to talk a little bit about the riff construction, because I love talking about riffs. So we've got a varying melting pot really of stuff that you've produced over the course of this album. We had that little Twitter exchange talking about the sort of Mastodon sort of harmonies that you're also doing, but also the sort of more modern Discord type stuff, you know, the pinch harmonics we've got in there. We've got how does your riff writing actually happen, in the sense of, is it just an organic process? You talked about before, where you talked about the chord pattern that led into this really expansive, very different Ithaca song. Do you often sit down with the intention of writing something quote unquote in this style, genre, whatever, or is it just like a band organization thing? Because Ithaca can be a multitude, and however you approach it, really.
Yeah, great question. It's a mix of like, it really varies actually. When language really was very like, I've got a riff, here's the riff, let's build the song out from the riff.
Yes.
And this was a bit more like, there was a lot of like, I've got a riff, let's see where we go. But there was a lot more like, our drummer James Lewis was he was writing a lot more beats as well, and then I could write riffs to that, and he's got his own influences and his own ideas, which kind of gives me a bit of a push, because a lot of writing, quote unquote, is me stood in front of my amp just playing for hours and hours and hours until I just come up with something. I'm like, oh, that's a nifty little, like, oh, there's an idea, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And just like playing with different pedals and sounds and tones, and just like for inspiration, like the You Should Have Gotten Back opening, as you say, was like, I was just like, I just want to like faff around on my clean channel with some nice pedals and just like dink about and just see if anything happens. And it did, which was great. At the same time, with this album, some of it was very like, now can we really try and be like songwriters? Can we really like Hold Be Held was really me trying to like write an actual song rather than, because all of them are songs, but there's an extent to which, because I'm not formally musically trained, what we're doing is like riff, chorus, riff,
Yeah.
a little bit.
Absolutely.
And although that's much more sophisticated this time around than it was on language, it still is a little bit of that, and that will always be what we're like, because that's the genre and all that sort of stuff, and that's what's fun. But like, yeah, we tried in a few key moments to really like, be more like songwriters, be more like, okay, I challenged myself to learn a lot more about like chord progressions and like musical movements and like chords, which like layering chords and inversions and sort of basic theory stuff that I should have learned a long time ago, but like that dipping my toe into massively inspired me to think a lot bigger. And also because I'm so obsessed with pop music. I love pop music, and I love, like, I've got a bit of a like, I don't know if this is interesting at all, but my music taste is very wide but quite thin. It's like I'm not like going to be able to tell you like which album on this, but like I've listened to a huge range of music, and I'm a bit of a musical magpie, and I'm trying to like. So I think I said this to Will, but like, there was like one clap sound on an Alice Coltrane album that we recreated, and there was like a ding thing from a Bruce. Oh no, it was like a vocal harmony from a Bruce Springsteen track that I was like, I specifically want this thing. And like Hold Be Held has like a bit of, as I said, a bit of like New Edition, Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis. It's got a bit of like Michael Bolton. It's got a bit of like, all sorts of stuff where which you're magpieing and taking tiny bits to build something a lot bigger. Which is a lot more. Whereas on language, I would have been like, I'm going to write a Lamb of God riff. This time I was like, okay, where can I bring like Janet Jackson and Prince and all this other, and Erykah Badu and all this other music that really is like such a big part of me in my life, into the record. If that,
No, it makes a ton of sense. I think that's what's allowing you to sort of make this sort of progression, isn't it? But there's if you kept going back to the well and being like, oh, I heard this Bullet for Valentine, Bleed from Within, Still Remains, all this type of stuff, then that's the kind of stuff that you're going to end up producing. I love that we've managed to get Bruce Springsteen in there. I'm a huge Bruce Springsteen fan.
Oh, sick. Well, let's chat about that at some point. I would also add actually to that is like, one thing I really tried to do this time, which I think we were successful at, was like, even with the heavy riffs, really try to pull from influences that were not as immediately obvious. I mean, I know you can hear the obvious ones, Mastodon's,
of course,
Norma Jeans and all these, because we love those bands, obviously, because they're incredible. But we tried to do a bit more like, okay, what bands do we really respect and love that we just don't feel people are drawing from? So, bands like Burnt by the Sun, Candiria, other like noughties sort of metalcore or bands who come from a bit more of a strange, maybe proggy world, Coalesce and people like that, as well as like more of the 90s groove metal that goes beyond just like Pantera and Vision of Disorder, and think, just trying to bring more groove, a bit more like sass, a bit more like all these, do you know what I mean? It was just like, so we weren't just trying to like, we were just trying to be really like, widen the lens of where we were like musical magpieing from.
It does feel like listening to this record, even before having a conversation with you, that you feel braver as musicians, as songwriters. I think that first album has given you that foundation to move forward. Does that mean, if I'm going to do the very stereotypical journalist thing, does that mean with the next record I can expect God knows what? Like, are we talking about you're going to go out and I'm going to find out that you were listening to Grand Funk Railroad for 9 months and you just sort of
absolutely. Oh my God, yes, I like that. Maybe, but it's not off the cards. Absolutely, like that's the one thing in the WhatsApp, like where we've just been like for the past week. The one thing that I said the one thing that we said, am I allowed to swear on this, by the way?
You absolutely are,
all
the time.
The funniest thing, Jamila just posted a thing being like, right, so Hold Be Held is everyone's favourite track. So I guess that just leads me to say, fuck you, Sam. That is just the funniest thing. But like, I was just like, yeah, like, that's it now. Like, I'm off the leash now. Like, all my silly bullshit, you know, I get to just, yeah. I've already got some ideas. Like, I shouldn't, no, I'm not going to say yet, because there'll be some surprises next time round. But there's already, with some very, very early demos, like, I'm a bit too in the They Fear Us brain to do proper writing yet. But even
it's terrific that you're already back there, though. Like, is that just instantaneous?
I mean, we have been starting to, a little. Oh man, to be honest, I think this is one of the things I struggle with the most. Like, it seems like bands that we know just go straight back into it, and they're just like, yeah, more music, right. And I'm like, no, dude, like, during the album cycle, like, my brain is quite occupied by like the album that we're on and like that creative vision before I try and think about what's next. But Lewis and I have had a couple of little sessions where we've just been toying around with some stuff, and I did get some time earlier this year to sort of faff around with some early demos while we were waiting for stuff to come out. And like, I've already, it's going to be like really silly, and they're gonna, like, the guys already know, like, we've discussed this, like, they know they're gonna have to rein me in even more because I'm gonna have some even stupider, crazier ideas. But it's gonna be like ballsy. The next time round will be so exciting, even more wacky, even more like, but not, when I say wacky, I mean, you know, not in the way of like, oh, you know, like Richard Cheese, or I don't know, you know what I mean, like, not goofy, but just like,
yeah,
be like,
I understand.
Do you know the distinction between a band who's just like, whack, here's a saxophone, and you're just like, no, versus like, you know, when bands bring in influences from other artists, and you're like, yes, this is really cool, and they've kind of, as I said, they've like earned it. So all like other genres are being explored in a way that I think is very interesting already.
That's really exciting. I think the prospect of having more bands like yourselves that are that included different genres, different ideas, different societally progressional ideas, looking like different to all the other bands. I think that as a combination is just, it's never going to be bad for the genre and really societally or anything like that. So that's absolutely fantastic. I'm gonna get you out here on this. What does the rest of 2022 look like for Ithaca?
It's a good question, man. It's fairly, I mean, like, we've got a lot of touring over the next couple of months. So yeah, UK, then Europe, and we're going to have a couple of specific festival dates that will be announced fairly shortly, later, kind of autumn. But then it's TBC, really. Like, we're kind of, well, what I will definitely say is, like, now that Jamila's visa situation is sorted, we've got some plans to do some of the things that we put off, you know, like, we're definitely going to do another video, for example, and we've got other plans for content and kind of output, let's call it, for things that we wanted to do that now we're completely flexible to do. And then just like riding the wave, to be honest, just riding the wave and seeing where this takes us. And like, the main thing is that people are really loving the record. People are really, really responding to it. The dream is that leads to some good opportunities and us getting in front of people. But the main thing is just like, getting out and playing and having some fun. And hopefully we have a big summer next year, big festival season. So that's so far is looking reasonably good. But that's it really. Just ride the wave, see how it goes, enjoy it, keep chatting shit on podcasts and banging on about diversity and being the woke Punisher, basically. Like, that's my main to-do list.
That sounds like a wonderful plan. Me and you are very similar to do this moving over the next 18 months at the very least. I want to say thank you for your time, Sam. It's been an absolute pleasure talking about the album with you today. Sam from Ithaca, everybody. Thank you so very much.